So, Final Destination Bloodlines is here. And as promised, we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the gruesome and what this movie does for the canon of Final Destination as a whole. I had to sit with this one. I watched it yesterday and I had to sit with my thoughts before making this video. In a lot of ways, this movie is a Final Destination movie while trying to do maybe more heavy lifting than any of the other sequels. You have your inciting event, you have the fallout from that inciting event with an exposition dump, and then the final sequence with subversions thrown in along the way. They definitely attempt to keep the bones of the Final Destination series in place while trying to subvert expectation and add different layers to the story as a whole. So, up until this point, the world of Final Destination basically started in 2000 with Flight 180. We didn't really get anything beyond that point. Now we've expanded out the timeline to the 60s and got that inciting event that we see has kind of an impact on the overarching world of Final Destination. And this is where we encounter our young couple going to the Skyview restaurant. First off, one of the biggest travesties of this movie is that both young and old Iris don't get more. I think both of those actresses did a bang up job with what they were given. Both of them chewed the scenery. I will say, I'm not sure that they intended for old Iris to be as funny as she was, but I laughed hard at that scene where her and Stephanie meet. I thought that was hilarious on a lot of levels. Probably unintentionally so, but we'll get there. So they get to the Skyview restaurant, and it's this giant restaurant on top of this giant building that's huge up off the ground. You see the tops of buildings. It's a whole thing. I'm pretty sure it was meant to be a riff on the Space Needle. And all I have to say about a restaurant suspended that far off the ground with glass floors like that, hell no. You could not pay me enough money to get up there. And so we see the catastrophe breakdown from there. You know, we go through the events, and there's a little bit of a twist in this one. So this kid has a coin that he fished out of the pool, and he gets scolded that you're not supposed to steal coins from the fountain. It's bad luck. Of course he does. And they're drawing on this world of superstition and cosmic forces and symbolic acts very heavily in this one. See, this whole thing is supposed to elicit a lot of different imagery and add to the ambiguity of the actual opposing force that's taking place. And they give this coin quasi magical properties in a way, especially when it comes back later on in the movie. I'm not gonna lie. I see. You ever say something? You ever step up to the plate and you have an opinion, and you cringe a little bit when you go to give your opinion because you understand that you are not the majority at all in giving this opinion. I didn't really like the penny sequence. I don't think that it was necessary. I don't think that it added anything, and especially especially in a world that you've already developed and established the sovereignty of death. Why do you need bad luck in this sort of movie? Like, it's almost like death is honoring human superstition, right? Giving the faux idea of good luck and bad luck, that he's just playing with the people in a way that makes it seem like, their own thoughts and conceptions on the world are true or accurate. Likewise, there's a lot of anthropomorphizing death in this one. There is a lot of genderizing death in this one in comparison to the other ones. I actually turned to my wife as we were watching this. I'm like, did they always genderize death? Now, I understand that there have absolutely been times where they have applied a masculine pronoun to death. I'm not saying that this is the first time ever, but it just feels like that was ratcheted up, just something that I noticed. And so we go through the sequence and we find out that this is the first of our subverted expectations, that instead of following now old Iris or Iris from that time and seeing how she grows up and gets older or whatever, we have her granddaughter, Stephanie. I don't know who needs to hear this, but don't ever nickname somebody Steffi. I've never heard that before in real life anyway. So that's where that's the difference here, where we're following the granddaughter versus following the original person who had the premonition. And that's where we start to get the bloodline dynamic, where she's kind of inherited the ability to have premonitions and all of that. And so we get the world, we're establishing the world, her family, and then we get the moment where Stephanie meets the grandmother. And again, I'm not sure they meant for this to be funny, but seriously, 2018 Laurie Strode called. She wants her gimmick back. She wants the name of her interior designer. Oh, okay, if you're gonna, and I understand somebody's yelling at me in the comments section right now that I am thinking too heavily into this movie, but seriously, if you are trying to avoid death, how many spikes do you need around? Like, why do you have so many spikes and making it so purposefully dystopian looking outside? Not to mention the fact that that fire extinguisher looks like it's from the 60s. It looks like you put it up there in the 60s and just never took it down. I'm surprised it still worked. And so we get the exchange. She's trying to explain this whole thing to her. She's not really buying it. I see you. That was hilarious to me when when she smells the rope burning and the whole 9 yards. So and the whole thing culminating with the death of old Iris. She knows that it's coming, and she just kind of lets it happen because she wants to try to keep her granddaughter safe, and she wants to give this. And so the whole scene culminates with the grandmother getting it by a fire extinguisher to the face. And we get the first major splatterfest of the movie when this fire extinguisher comes, hits her in the face, because seeing is believing. The only way she's going to actually believe this is if she sees it play out in front of her. And the and so she gets this book from the grandmother, and it's all of her research, it's all of her information that she's compiled about Death's design. And the thing about the Final Destination series is each installment in the franchise reveals a little bit more about Death's methods and possible ways to combat them. In two, there's a suggestion that new life can invalidate Death's list. Some people say that there's a balance to everything. For every life, there's a death, that sort of thing. In the third one, we introduce the idea of photographs, that sort of thing. Now, this is where, and in five, we establish the whole if you take a life, you get that time aspect. And so we have this book that has a lot of nods and callbacks to the franchise as a whole. Same thing with the timeline that she puts up on the wall. That has a lot of callbacks to different points in the franchise. And so we find out somehow that it's going in age order throughout the family. And the whole idea is that none of these people should have existed because she should have died. And now death is basically coming to close the loop. So, what we're establishing is that hundreds of people would have gotten it by death over time, all because people would have died. But what about their bloodlines? What about whole? And nobody noticed up to this point. I'm just saying. Anyway, so we get the Scooby Doo portion of our episode. And so we get the Scooby Doo portion of this installment where they're going through, they're figuring out how to cheat death. They find out that somebody survived JB. And this is where we get our scene with the late, great Tony Todd. This was undoubtedly the high point of the movie for me. That was really cool. The way that they canonized the other movies in this universe, the way that they used him to establish why all of this is happening. And they finally gave some backstory as to how he knows so much. And they had him use the name. It felt like Tony Todd came in, didn't read off a script, and just gave a statement about death. That's how good that was. I thought that was a masterpiece and absolutely the high point. And so we have and we do have an interesting juxtaposition, right? Because you have the older person who has kind of accepted that this is the way that it is, that this is what's happening, and there's nothing that you can do about it. They have accepted the inevitability of death, whereas the younger people, they're not accepting that. They want to reject everything that is established about the inevitability of death, and they want to figure out how to beat this thing. They're railing against death. Something feels malevolent about death's actions to them, where Tony Todd is just saying that it is sovereign, it is inevitable, it is an immutable law of nature to it. And that's part of why I think the whole Penny thing misses me, is there's like a sadistic quality to that particular scene if you're establishing that death is just screwing with people and using superstitions against people, where that's not really ever been the case to that degree. And so we get the idea of, and this is where we get some of that deeper meaning that they're trying to reach for. So part of this is the grandmother kind of loses it, and the mom leaves because she thinks that she's going to be the reason why her family dies, and tries to protect them by leaving. And it's this look at generational trauma, but you can also draw some of those same notes from the first one in this one, where it's kind of a postmodern look at the Christian idea of original sin and the generations that were affected. You know, death came from Adam and it's coming for all of us too, sort of thing. But you have this idea of a second Adam, you know, the Jesus figure, God the Son, who entered into creation, taking on a human body in order to answer the curse that's introduced by the first Adam. And the reason why I draw that comparison is because when you look at the way that the Christ story has affected the way that we in the modern day look at hero figures, it they resonate with us. We want that hero figure to emerge victorious, especially over something like that. And we invest so much into the protagonist being victorious in the story. And so when they're not, it's that much more gut wrenching when it doesn't pan out. And so the best you can do is postpone your death. It's a very postmodern view of reality where death always has the last laugh. And again, it kind of laughs in the face of and again, it kind of laughs in the face of this establishment of something afterward, right? In Revelation, it says he will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. And so in the film, these words are presented as like background noise to an inevitable death cycle, the victory of death. And that's where I think this movie sits as probably the best sequel out of all of them. And so, and I do think it's interesting that they pseudo canonized, though not really, the idea of the rule from two and the rule from five pulling forward. So the fact that, and so I think it's interesting that I do think it's interesting in Tony Todd's scene, he goes back to the rule from two and the rule from five. That if there's new life, that it will break death's design, and if you take somebody's life, you'll get their time. Again, it's playing on this idea of resurrection beating death, which again they which again they kind of laugh at the very end. So we get the Tony Todd scene, and then we go through the rest of the movie, through the rest of the kills, throughout the rest of the family, until it is down to, you know, all of the cousins go in a variety of ways. I will say I thought it was interesting that she could see the individual components of how a person's going to go, and she just kind of puts it all together, with the exception of, like, that only happens once. That really only happens once. And she doesn't see any of the other ones. She's got this book, but it doesn't really factor into anything, even down to the cabin. They try to return to the cabin, a la Halloween 2018. But for being a cabin that's supposed to be death proof, man, it certainly burnt down pretty easy. And then calling back to the second one, she is saved from drowning by her brother, and they make it to the end. They think they've won, and then somebody, you know, says the line drop that you didn't technically die. If you were still breathing and he got you breathing again, then you didn't technically die. And then we get that damn penny coming back again and causing a train wreck, and then logs coming through and taking out the siblings. I will say I'm of two minds. They really did a good job of making you care about the characters here. There really wasn't somebody explicitly that you saw that really made me feel I really don't like them. You generally everybody other than the mom that we were introduced to was a solid character. And in a way that gives you a little bit of hope that somebody's going to make it out the other side. This is still a Final Destination movie. You're not getting that. But I'm also glad that nobody did, because hopefully this legacy sequel now ends. Like, it's the period on the sentence. Like, we're done now. And so that gets me into my wrap up thoughts. Um, if you went into this looking for a Final Destination movie and nothing more than another Final Destination movie, you're probably going to love this movie. You're probably going to think that this movie is fantastic. My problem is it didn't really do anything super inventive. There were a couple of scenes that we've never seen before, but even those, meh. See, the thing about the original is that it relied on atmosphere more than Carnage Candy. And this is why I'm not a full blown horror YouTuber, because I have a hard time with a movie that is just, oh, this is it's if you were expecting anything more than just a lowbrow Final Destination movie, then that's your problem. I think that's lazy. I don't think that that really is a good statement on the quality of a movie. And looking at a movie and saying, "Oh, I just came for the kills," is kind of like watching NASCAR just for the wrecks. I don't know. And so the all of the callbacks and all of the nods, I don't know. I thought it was fine. I thought it was interesting at points, but largely it was all very formulaic. And it was just another, at that level, it was just another Final Destination movie. I think it is interesting that they tried to bring in philosophical thought more than any other sequel. And this is a franchise very much designed, and this is a and this is a franchise that is very much defined by its sequels. See, I just don't think you can capture what the first and this is a franchise that is very much defined by its sequels. See, I just don't think you can capture what the first one did, because it's a product of its time. It sits there with Blair Witch as being statements of their time. 99 2000 was a different time, y'all. It was a very sarcastic, it was a very nihilistic time, it was very countercultural. It was very much a time where the idea and the edict was rage against the machine, because up to that point we had lived in a purity world, a moralistic world, and the idea was you're laughing in the face of those ideals. And every single sequel, to varying degrees, has just leaned into the Rube Goldberg of it all, rather than the statements that the initial one was making. I do think it's interesting that they added to the world. I'm always down for a good lore dump where you're getting the lore of the world and the rules and the mechanics of the world. That part I can say I appreciated, but definitely added some substance to the movie. The problem is it only mattered until it didn't matter. And then on top of it, they added random family drama just to add pseudo emotional stakes into the movie and try to flesh this out more than just here's a Final Destination movie. And the Bloodline thing doesn't really make a lot of sense. And also, if all of this is going in order, then how is Tony Todd's character still alive? I understand the answer, because it's in bad taste to not have Tony Todd in his last performance, or to in any way, shape, or form insinuate that his character died because of the actual real life events. I get it. We want Tony Todd back for that last one, but also it doesn't necessarily make sense. So I went into this one with high hopes, y'all, because I really expected it to tie together more of the universe, and that's on me. This did more to give weight to this is a world where each one of the movies happened, rather than this is an explanation for the characters that we have followed up to this point. Because outside of some nods, some blink and you miss it moments, And outside of a name drop and a couple of blink and you miss it moments, there's not really any kind of canonicity to any of the other movies outside of that. And so this just kind of sits almost by itself with nods to some of the other movies, which fine, okay, cool. And honestly, if this is a movie that you wildly enjoyed and you saw this and were like, yes, this is another Final Destination movie, you've thought too much into it. I mean, literally, the name of the channel is Thoughts from a Greedy Geek. So and so if you enjoyed this movie, awesome. I can't say as though I didn't enjoy it, but the whole thing was just kind of mid. And so I went into this movie with high hopes, and I can't say as though it necessarily lived up to them. I don't know what kind of backwards reality that we are living in where this movie has like a 90 some percent, and all of the critics are like, this is the best thing since sliced bread. Okay, I think we need to get to a point where we can say, hey, there's good points, but also that doesn't mean that this is the best thing since sliced bread. Just like there's bad points, but it's not the worst movie ever made. There's nuance. Not every movie is amazing, and not every movie absolutely sucks. This movie is just fine. It sits there in the noise of the horror genre. But this is an exact example as to why I keep saying we need to be done with legacy sequels. We need to be done with franchise fatigue and retread. I understand it's been over a decade now. And if this is the last note and the swan song, and they try some heavy lifting to say, hey, this is deeper than you otherwise realized, okay, fine. And if you enjoyed that, and if you enjoyed the kills in this one, and if it really was just about the carnage candy for you for this one, and oh, great. I hope you had an amazing time and the theater experience was absolutely stellar for you. This just was. It's just one note to me. And so when I look at this, I'm it just makes me watching a movie like this makes me crave original storytelling all the more. So chime in below. Let me know, were there themes or deeper notes that on one last note, I do think it would be funny if this came out as a parody of elevated horror. So there's definitely generational trauma that showcased throughout this entire thing. And is this a wink and a nod at the generational trauma? Is this a wink and a nod at different forms and aspects of trauma and horror along the way? I do think that would be funny. I do appreciate the fact that there are deeper tones here, that they did try the hardest since the initial one to get philosophical. I'm probably one of the only people who digs that portion of it, but all in all, it's fine. I would say that it is a solid quick and dirty ranking because I'm not sure I'm going to make a full video about this. The first one, 5, Bloodlines, 2, 3, 4. So that's it. Final Destination has come and so that's it. Final Destination Bloodlines has come and gone. Let me know, did you like the movie? What was your favorite scene from it? Are you hoping that they are going to make more sequels off of this one? Chime in down below. Until next time, peace.